Question 1. In light of recent developments, a storage administrator, Ista Hughes, is tasked with configuring a Brocade Gen 5 SAM fabric that needs to support long-distance data replication between two data centers located 200 kilometers apart. He plans to use ILZA equipment and needs to ensure optimal performance and reliability without introducing additional latency. He's debating between standard E ports and LD distance E ports with buffer credits. Which configuration approach should Ista Hughes prioritize to meet these requirements effectively? A. Use standard E ports with default buffer credits. B. Configure LDE ports with manually calculated buffer credits based on link distance and speed. C. Use F-port trunking to aggregate the bandwidth and reduce latency. D. Implement access gateway mode to bypass the need for ISILs. Answer. Correct answer. B. Configure LDE ports with manually calculated buffer credits based on link distance and speed. Explanation. When configuring long-distance LDE, long-distance E ports are designed to address latency and flow control issues over extended links. Brocade recommends calculating buffer credits based on the bandwidth delay product (BDP) to ensure sufficient credits to maintain line rate. Using standard E ports without adjusting buffer credits can lead to underutilization or dropped frames. F-port trunking is unrelated to ISIL optimization, and access gateway mode is used to simplify edge device connectivity, not core-for-core ISIL extension. Ref. Brocade FOSS Admin Guide. Long distance and buffer credit configuration. Question 2. During the process of deploying a new zoning configuration, Is Patel notices that multiple zones have overlapping members, especially involving a key storage port. She's unsure whether to apply the configuration as is or consolidate zones into single large zone to reduce redundancy. Which of the following best represents the most effective zoning strategy in this context? A. Consolidate all zones into single zone for easier management. B. Avoid overlapping zones and use one initiator to one target zoning policy. C. Rely on automatic zoning tools in Fabric OS to optimize the configuration. D. Convert all zones to broadcast zones to allow all devices to communicate. Answer. Correct answer. B. Avoid overlapping zones and use of one initiator to one target zoning policy. Explanation. Best practices in zoning emphasize device-level isolation to improve security and reduce troubleshooting complexity. One initiator to one target zoning prevents unauthorized communication and minimizes the risk of RCF loading. Overlapping zones can cause confusion during diagnostics and lead to unintended access. Automatic zoning tools are limited and should not replace structured design. Broadcast zones are a security and performance risk and are strongly discouraged. Ref. Brocade Zoning Best Practices Guide. Question 3. With respect to implementing trunking between switches, Ista Salazar has configured multiple ISILs between two Brocade Gen 5 switches. However, despite enabling trunking, performance remains suboptimal and traffic seems unbalanced across links. Which issue is most likely affecting trunk performance? A. The ISILs are not on the same port group within the ASIC. B. The switches are running different firmware versions. C. There is an active maps policy throttling traffic. D. Trunking is incompatible with Gen 5 hardware. Answer. Correct answer A. The ISILs are not on the same port group within the ASIC. Explanation. Brocade trunking requires that all ISIL ports in the trunk group be on the same port group or group boundaries within the same ASIC have identical configurations, speed, distance, credit, etc., and be cabled correctly. Mismatched ASIC groupings prevent the links from forming. Trunk can cause traffic imbalance. Firmware mismatch can cause instability but won't necessarily impact trunk formation. Maps policies monitor traffic but do not inherently block trunking. Trunking is fully supported on Gen 5 switches. Ref. Brocade Trunking Configuration Guide. Question 4. Considering the evidences Tanaka is analyzing, a sudden spike in latency for a specific application that relies on fiber channel, she uses flow vision and identifies sustained frame delays on a key initiator port. What is the most appropriate next action she should take? A. Disable the port and reroute traffic. B. Use maps to raise thresholds and ignore the event. C. Analyze congestion using Porpusho and check for buffer credit starvation. D. Clear all zoning configurations to eliminate port errors. Answer. Correct answer C. Analyze congestion using port pressure and check for buffer credit starvation. Explanation. High latency in fiber channel environments often stems from buffer credit starvation, congestion, or poor flow control. Flow vision identifies microbursts and delays, but port pressure provides critical counters, e.g., zero transmit buffer credits. This helps pinpoint whether the initiator is overwhelmed or flow control is misconfigured. Ports is disruptive and not diagnostic. Maps threshold adjustments hide the problem. Clearing zoning is unnecessary and detrimental. Ref. Brocade Fabric Vision and Performance Monitoring Tools Guide. Question 5. When faced with a failed firmware upgrade on one of the Gen 5 switches, Mr. Ortega attempts to roll back to the previous firmware image. However, he encounters errors and the switch enters a marginal state. What is the best practice action to resolve this situation? A. Manually restore the primary partition using USB recovery tools. B. Use the firmware clean install command from the boot shell. C. Reboot the switch repeatedly until it boots into the old firmware. D. Execute firmware restore to force switch to revert automatically. Answer. Correct answer. B. Use the firmware clean install command from the boot shell. Explanation. In a failed upgrade situation, Brocade recommends using firmware clean install to perform a clean image reinstallation while preserving configuration if possible. This method avoids undefined behaviors caused by corrupted partitions. USB recovery is only used if firmware installation fails completely. Rebooting endlessly doesn't solve the root problem. Firmware restore command doesn't exist in FUS. A rollback is only supported if dual partition was managed properly. Ref. Brocade Fabric OS Firmware Upgrade Guide. Question 6. The interrelationship between Fabric Watch and maps is often misunderstood during Gen 5 upgrades. A team of engineers decommissioned Fabric Watch and fully migrated to maps but reported missing certain threshold-based alerts. Why might maps not be triggering the expected alarms? A. Maps requires dedicated licenses for legacy Fabric Watch policies. B. Default maps policies only monitor standard health metrics unless customized. C. Maps is incompatible with Gen 5 switches without patching. D. Maps replaces zoning policies and does not handle health monitoring. Answer. Correct answer. B. Default maps policies only monitor standard health metrics unless customized. Explanation. What maps replaces Fabric Watch? Its default configuration monitors only essential metrics, e.g. temperature, CRC errors, credit loss. If Fabric Watch had custom thresholds, e.g. IPS frame rate, these must be manually redefined in maps policies. No additional licenses are needed beyond Fabric Vision. Maps is natively supported on Gen 5 switches. It complements zoning but is not related to zoning policies. Ref. Brocade Maps Administration Guide. Question 7. To better understand access gateway AG mode, Mr. Yamada is configuring a Brocade 6505 switch to function as an AG in a virtualized environment. He aims to reduce domain count and simplify edge port management. However, he notices NPIV errors when connecting certain hosts. What is a likely misconfiguration day? AG mode was enabled after zoning was configured. B. The switch was rebooted into standard mode without notice. C. F ports are not mapped to appropriate N ports on the core switch. D. AG mode is not supported on the 6505 switch. Answer. Correct answer. C. F ports are not mapped to appropriate N ports on the core switch. Explanation. In access gateway mode, F ports must be properly mapped to N ports on the Fabric core switch to establish virtual connections using NPIV. If the mapping is incorrect or missing, the end devices won't log in, leading to NPIV errors. The Brocade 6505 fully supports AG mode. Rebooting to standard mode would change behavior but is not common. Administrative action. AG mode can be enabled at any time. It doesn't depend on zoning. Ref. Brocade Access Gateway Administrator's Guide. Question 8. The core principles of Fabric OS licensing are often overlooked when enabling advanced features on Brocade Gen 5 switches. A system integrator has issues enabling extended fabric and trunking on newly installed switches. What must be ensured to enable these features properly? A. The switches must be upgraded to FUS-V or higher. B. A valid pod port on demand license must be applied for every port. C. The appropriate feature licenses must be installed using license keys. D. Switches must be registered with Brocade support portal. Answer. Correct answer. C. The appropriate feature licenses must be installed using license keys. Explanation. Advanced features like extended fabric and trunking require individual feature-based licenses to be installed via license seed. These are separate from pod licenses, which only control active port count. FOSS versioning doesn't automatically grant license access. Registration with Brocade is for support, not feature unlocking. Ref. Brocade Lies Guide. Gen 5 switches. Question 9. While examining a port that frequently logs link reset errors, Istokolsky uses PortaShow and notices high RJT counters. After checking cabling, he suspects protocol mismatches between connected devices. What should he check to confirm and resolve this issue? A. Whether the port is in loop mode instead of point-to-point. B. If the port is part of a virtual fabric. C. Whether maps is generating threshold violations. D. If UO duplicated across fabrics. Answer. Correct answer A. Whether the port is in loop mode instead of point-to-point. Explanation. Link reject RJT errors often result from incompatible port negotiation, such as when one device expects point-to-point end port but is connected to a device set for loop L port. This misalignment causes repeated handshakes to fail. Virtual fabric membership doesn't impact physical port behavior directly. Maps helps monitor but directly explain protocol mismatches. Sending issues not at RJT. RAF. Fiber Channel Standards. SAS3 and Brocade FOSS Troubleshooting Guide. Question 10. The effectiveness of NPIV depends heavily on fabric zoning and proper port login management. During a SAN audit, Janssen finds that multiple virtual machines are not logging in despite being configured with UA. A likely cause of this issue. A. The NPIV feature was not enabled on the physical F port. B. ALD are outside the allowable zoning range. C. Fabric OS does not support EPIV beyond the UO. D. The Fabric UA only instead of port zoning. Answer. Correct answer A. The NPIV feature was not enabled on the physical F port. Explanation. NPIV and port ID virtualization allows multiple LUO login through a single physical F port, but the NPIV capability must be explicitly enabled. Otherwise, only the first login is accepted. Zoning is not range-bound but member-based. Brocade supports significantly more than ADU port, typically 255 plus. Zinta RU pop 8 does not impact NPIV logging capability. RAF, Brocade FOSS Configuration Guide, NPIV support. Question 11. Throughout the course of an internal security audit, Keller identifies that certain administrators are using the same credentials to access multiple Brocade Gen 5 switches across different fabric zones. She plans to enforce role-based access control, RBAC, and unique user identities. Which approach will best ensure accountability and secure role delegation? A. Create shared accounts with elevated privileges for all zones. B. Use LDAP integration with Fabric OS and assign roles through group mapping. C. Disable all user accounts except admin to centralize access. D. Apply zoning restrictions to prevent unauthorized user access. Answer. Correct answer. B. Use LDAP integration with Fabric OS and assign roles through group mapping. Explanation. Using LDAP integration allows centralized authentication and authorization, and it supports group-based role assignment using Fabric as RBAC. Each user has a unique identity, allowing traceable operations and accountability. Shared credentials violate security best practices and are not auditable. Zoning is unrelated to administrative access control. Disabling all users except admin creates a high-risk single point of failure. REF, Brocade Fabric OS Administrator's Guide, User Account Management, and LDAP. Question 12. By comparing two fabrics with similar workloads, Istokata notices that one is experiencing higher congestion and frame drops. He suspects improper quality of service cost configuration. Which of the following best illustrates how cost should be correctly applied in a Brocade Gen 5 environment? A. Cost must be applied only at the ISIL level to prioritize trunk frames. B. Cost is enabled by default and does not require manual configuration. C. Cost priority tagging must be configured on both ingress and egress ports to be effective. D. Cost is only applicable to long-distance fabric configurations. Answer. Correct answer. C. Cost priority tagging must be configured on both ingress and egress ports to be effective. Explanation: for quality of service costs to function effectively in a Gen 5 fabric, priority tags must be configured on both ends of the traffic path. Brocade uses class of service cost markings to classify traffic, which must be consistent. Cost is not enabled by default. It must be manually applied. While useful long-distance links, it's equally applicable to local congestion management. Limiting cost to ISILs is incorrect. Ref. Brocade FOSS Advanced Configuration Guide. Cost and traffic prioritization. Question 13. From a practical standpoint, Istamorty is trying to isolate traffic between two departments using the same physical SAN infrastructure. He considers virtual fabrics (VF) to achieve logical separation. Which of the following must be configured before enabling VF on Brocade Gen 5 switches? A. Domain IDs must be manually assigned across all switches in the fabric. B. All zoning must be deleted before VF can be activated. C. A license key must be installed to activate virtual fabrics. D. All switches must be running maps in Flow Vision. Answer. Correct answer. C. A license key must be installed to activate virtual fabrics. Explanation: virtual fabrics (VF) allow logical segmentation of a physical fabric into isolated partitions. To enable VF, a dedicated VF license must be installed. Domain ID management comes afterward. During VF configuration, zoning system will be scoped per VF was enabled. Maps and Flow Vision are optional and unrelated. Enabling VF. Ref. Brocade Fabric OS Administrator's Guide. Virtual fabrics. Question 14. Demonstrated by a network incident, several hosts lost connectivity due to incorrect zoning propagation during a firmware upgrade. Is NASA, the fabric administrator, wants to avoid such scenarios in future maintenance? Which practice should she follow when performing firmware upgrades in a multi-switch fabric? A. Upgrade all switches simultaneously to maintain version uniformity. B. Always use disruptive mode to ensure fabric consistency. C. Use non-disruptive firmware download, NDM, and staged upgrades. D. Perform upgrades through web tools only to avoid CLIAs. Answer. Correct answer. C. Use non-disruptive firmware download, NDM, and staged upgrades. Explanation: NDM, non-disruptive firmware download, ensures high availability during upgrades in Gen 5 environments by updating one partition at a time. Staged upgrades, switch by switch, prevent cascading failures. Upgrading all at once or using disruptive mode can destabilize fabric operations. Web tools can help but are limited and inherently safer than CLI. Ref. Brocade Fabric OS Firmware Upgrade Procedures, NDM Guidelines. Question 15. The predominant theory suggests that Maps Monitoring and Alerting Policy Suite can replace Fabric Watch and streamline monitoring. Yet, during configuration, Mr. Davison disables critical thresholds accidentally. Which of the following is the safest way to reset maps to default behavior without losing other configurations? A. Reboot the switch to reload factory settings. B. Use the maps to full policy command to restore standard thresholds. C. Delete all user-defined policies manually. D. Remove maps license and reinstall it. Answer. Correct answer. B. Use the maps to full policy command to restore standard thresholds. Explanation: using maps to full policy safely resets maps thresholds and actions to factory defaults without affecting zoning, VF, or user account configurations. Rebooting or relicensing is unnecessary and risky. Manually deleting policies is error-prone and may not restore defaults accurately. Ref. Brocade Fabric Vision. Maps command reference. Question 16. When analyzing the effectiveness of trunking, Aurora configures 4 ISILs between 2 Brocade Gen 5 switches and enables F-port trunking. However, performance remains linear rather than aggregated. What did Aurora likely overlook in his configuration? A. Trunking is only supported on G ports. B. All F ports must be connected to the same RDUID. Trunking requires matching firmware levels on both switches. D. F-port trunking is only supported on ISILs, not device ports. Answer. Correct answer. B. All F ports must be connected to the same IDU explanation. F-port trunking aggregates bandwidth from multiple physical connections between a host and switch, but only if all F-ports connect data will terminate different to the value fails. G-ports generate trunking is not limited to them. Firmware mismatch affects trunking but doesn't stop it if compatible. F-port trunking is explicitly designed for end devices, unlike E-port trunking. Ref. Brocade trunking configuration guide. Question 17. Examining the consequences of unauthorized ISIL disconnections, ISTA wants to ensure that inter-switch links are protected from accidental disablement or tampering. Which configuration provides the best safeguard against unintentional ISIL changes? A. Apply administrative disable on all ISILs during idle hours. B. Implement port fencing through maps for the ISILs. C. Use fabric binding and enforce ISIL authentication via DLS. D. Configure zoning policies to restrict ISIL usage. Answer. Correct answer. C. Use fabric binding and enforce ISIL authentication via DLS. Explanation. Fabric binding and DLS dynamic load sharing authentication ensure that only authorized switches join the fabric. This prevents unauthorized ISIL formation, spoofing, and disruptions. Port fencing reacts after errors occur. It's not proactive. Disabling ports is manual and does not prevent tampering. Zoning applies to devices, not ISILs. Ref. Brocade Security Best Practices and Fabric OS Security Guide. Question 18. A detailed analysis of port-level statistics reveals that several ports experience periodic credit loss. Istabel suspects faulty cabling but wants to confirm, without disrupting traffic, which Brocade feature should he use to validate signal integrity non-disruptively. A. Bottleneck detection. B. Flow vision. C. Clearlink diagnostics with D ports. D. Porter show command. Answer. Correct answer. C. Clearlink diagnostics with D ports. Explanation. Clearlink diagnostics (CLD) with D ports allows non-disruptive signal integrity testing, including optical power levels and loopback diagnostics. It's the ideal tool to validate SFPS, cables, and physical integrity. Bottleneck detection focuses on congestion, not signal. Flow vision tracks traffic flows. Port show provides counters, but doesn't validate cabling directly. Ref. Brocade Fabric Vision Technology Overview. Clearlink Diagnostics. Question 19. The correlation between our overutilization and degraded application performance prompts Mr. Abrams to investigate congestion points. He decides to use port per show and top of show. What critical metrics should he look for to identify congestion? A. Buffer-to-buffer credit usage above 95%. B. Link utilization consistently above 30%. C. Time spent at zero transmit buffer credits. D. Number of zoning entries per switch. Answer. Correct answer. C. Time spent at zero transmit buffer credits. Explanation. Zero transmit buffer credit time indicates when a port is unable to send data due to lack of credits. An unmistakable sign of congestion or flow control issues. High utilization alone doesn't confirm congestion. Buffer usage above 95% may still allow full throughput. Zoning entries don't relate to link level congestion. Ref. Brocade FOSS Tools Guide. Port per show interpretation. Question 20. In comparison with traditional performance analysis, Werner wants to use flow vision to pinpoint bottlenecks affecting a specific database application during peak hours. Which flow vision feature is best suited to isolate and monitor this application's traffic in real time? A. Latency island detection. B. Flow monitoring session using flow vision. C. Maps congestion map. D. Use ERDMP to trace traffic path. Answer. Correct answer. B. Flow monitoring session using flow vision. Explanation. Flow monitoring within flow vision enables real-time visibility into specific flows identified by source identifier or frame types. It isolates problematic traffic patterns without affecting others. Latency islands are broader indicators. ERDMP is reactive and unfiltered. Map shows thresholds, not specific traffic flows. RAF, Brocade Fabric Vision, Flow Vision User Guide. Question 21. From multiple perspectives, a large healthcare provider is expanding its storage infrastructure and connecting several Brocade Gen 5 switches across a multi-site campus. Mr. Douglas, the network architect, is evaluating FSIP fiber channel over IP as a transport method for ISILs between these sites. Which of the following limitations must Mr. Douglas consider when deploying FSIP for this environment? FSIP is only supported on F ports, not A ports. B. FSIP requires dedicated hardware encryption modules in Gen 5 switches. C. FSIP introduces higher latency and is susceptible to IP network congestion. D. FSIP only supports 1 gram speeds and cannot be upgraded. Answer. Correct answer. C. FSIP introduces higher latency and is susceptible to IP network congestion. Explanation. FSIP encapsulates fiber channel frames over IP networks, which introduces additional latency and makes the transport path vulnerable to packet drops or jitter due to IP network congestion. These are crucial considerations for synchronous replication or latency-sensitive applications. FSIP is not limited to F ports and does not require dedicated encryption hardware. In Gen 5 switches, encryption is software-based unless enhanced via optional modules. Modern FSIP supports speeds above 1 gram with proper configuration. Ref. Brocade FSIP Configuration Guide. Question 22. Given the circumstances, Roman is investigating repeated login failures from a new blade server chassis that connects to a Brocade Gen 5 SIT or LIPA correctly zoned, but none are logging into the fabric. Which possible issue should she consider based on Brocade's NPIV support requirements? A. The blade server is missing flogi parameters. B. The physical F port does not support multiple NPIV logins. C. Zoning is configured using port-based zoning instead of UBA. D. The switch is using virtual fabrics which block NPIV by default. Answer. Correct answer. B. A physical F port does not support multiple NPIV logins. Explanation. EPIV and port ID virtualization requires the physical F port to support multiple logins from different. If a port is not correctly configured or does not support NPIV due to hardware firmware constraints, the logins will fail. Port-based zoning itself doesn't block NPIV, although UBIT zoning is generally preferred in such scenarios. Virtual fabrics support NPIV, unless explicitly restricted. Flogi failures are uncommon. The lawyer are visible. Ref. Brocade EPIV Configuration Guidelines. Question 23. In light of recent developments, Brocade has emphasized using maps over legacy Fabric Watch. Mr. Cohen is analyzing congestion using maps on a Brocade Gen 5 switch. He sees a series of bottleneck alerts but cannot identify the root cause. Which additional tool should Mr. Cohen use to complement maps for detailed flow analysis? A. Portasher. B. Flow Vision. C. SAP Walk. D. Bottleneckman. Answer. Correct answer. B. Flow Vision. Explanation. Flow Vision provides real-time, detailed visibility into traffic flows, helping isolate specific paths, devices, or frame patterns that may be triggering Maps alerts. It complements Maps' threshold-based alerting system by offering dynamic diagnostics. Porsche shows useful but not flow-specific. Bottleneckman is part of Maps and is already in use. SME Walk is too general and doesn't help pinpoint flow-level issues. Ref. Brocade Fabric Vision. Flow Vision Guide. Question 24. Across different scenarios, Fabric administrators often misinterpret the purpose of bottleneck detection. Mr. Lindgren configures bottleneck detection on a Brocade Gen 5 switch and notices alerts related to latency bottlenecks. Which of the following best describes what a latency bottleneck alert indicates? A. The port has exceeded its licensing capacity. B. The buffer-to-buffer credits are consistently depleted due to slow receivers. C. The port is configured for point-to-multipoint topology. D. The switch fabric has failed and entered segmentation. Answer. Correct answer. B. The buffer-to-buffer credits are consistently depleted due to slow receivers. Explanation. A latency bottleneck indicates that the port is unable to transmit frames due to a slow drain device or insufficient buffer credits. This often causes congestion and affects upstream performance. It has no relation to license limitations, point-to-multipoint configurations, or segmentation of the fabric. Ref. Brocade Bottleneck Detection Wipe and a Fuss Guide. Question 25. Under the assumption that a newly joined switch has default zoning disabled, Istacata notices that devices connected to this switch can unexpectedly access storage on other zones. What security risk does this represent, and how should it be addressed? A. It indicates a rogue switch and requires disabling ports. B. Default zoning must be set to no access mode to prevent open fabric. C. This behavior is expected when the switch is running in AG mode. D. Enable Fabric Watch to isolate rogue access. Answer. Correct answer. B. Default zoning must be set to no access mode to prevent open fabric. Explanation. When default zoning is disabled, any device not explicitly zoned is granted access. Significant security risk. To secure the fabric, default zoning should be configured as no access, preventing unintended communication. Access gateway mode does not override zoning enforcement. B. Port disabling is drastic and not first-line solution. Fabric Watch does not handle zoning enforcement. Ref. Brocade Zoning and Security Configuration Guide. Question 26. The impact of congestion on a critical Oracle database leads Ivanova to implement traffic isolation zones TIS on a Brocade Gen 5 switch. What is a key requirement for a traffic isolation zone to function properly? A. All member ports must be configured as G ports. B. It must include both initiator and target ports in the zone. C. It must be the only zone in the configuration. D. Traffic isolation zones require virtual fabric mode to operate. Answer. Correct answer. B. It must include both initiator and target ports in the zone. Explanation. Traffic isolation zones TIS isolate specific paths in a fabric to guarantee performance. For the isolation to work, the zone must include both initiated to-do AD puts are not required. TIS coexist with other zones. Virtual fabrics are not a requirement for TIS functionality. Ref. Brocade FOSS. Quality of Service and Isolation Guide. Question 27. Taking into account that many Gen 5 switches operate in high-performance environments, Istijang notices increased CPU utilization during peak workloads when Flow Vision is enabled. What best practice should he apply to reduce performance impact? A. Disable zoning to reduce overhead. B. Increase maps polling intervals. C. Limit the number of concurrent Flow Vision sessions. D. Enable clearing diagnostics during production. Answer. Correct answer. C. Limit the number of concurrent Flow Vision sessions. Explanation. Flow Vision can be resource intensive, especially when multiple sessions run concurrently. Best practice is to limit active sessions and apply filters to reduce data collection load. Disabling zoning is a security violation. Increasing maps intervals helps monitoring but doesn't affect Flow Vision load. Running diagnostics like clearing during production can disrupt performance. Ref. Brocade Fabric Vision and Performance Optimization Guide. Question 20. Despite the fact that all firmware upgrades were completed, Ista Oli finds that configuration mismatches persist across ISILs. He suspects that the configuration was not propagated correctly. Which command should he use to propagate configuration settings across the fabric? A. Config download. B. Zone copy. C. CAGAVE. D. CFISHI transhow. Answer. Correct answer. A. Config download. Explanation. The ** config download ** command allows administrators to download configuration files from one switch to another, ensuring consistency in zoning, fabric settings, and security policies. CFG saves local changes only. Zone copy handles zoning, not full config. CSG transhow shows active configurations but does not apply them. Ref. Brocade FOSS command reference guide. Question 29. In the modern context of cloud-integrated SANs, Donovan needs to manage switches remotely with minimal latency and full fabric visibility. She chooses Brocade Network Advisor, BNA. What is a key advantage of using BNA over CLI or web tools for fabric management? A. BNA allows packet inspection at the Ethernet layer. B. BNA can monitor and configure multi-fabric environments from a single interface. C. BNA passes licensing requirements for advanced features. D. BNA is only required for legacy Gen 4 switches. Answer. Correct answer. B. BNA can monitor and configure multi-fabric environments from a single interface. Explanation. Brocade Network Advisor, BNA, provides a unified GUI platform for managing, monitoring, and configuring multiple fabrics an advantage over CLI or web tools, which are typically switch-specific. BNA does not bypass license enforcement. It's not exclusive to Gen 4 hardware and doesn't provide Ethernet inspection. Ref. Brocade Network Advisor Administrator Guide. Question 30. Research indicates that repeated frame drops are observed on ports that appear otherwise healthy. Eastern Norton suspects marginal optics or cabling, which feature can confirm the quality of SFPS and cable connections without removing them from service. A. Bottleneckman. B. Port show. C. Clearlink diagnostic. D. Port testing in loopback mode. D. Flow vision congestion map. Answer. Correct answer. C. Clearlink diagnostic. D. Port testing in loopback mode. Explanation. Clearlink diagnostic. D ports, especially in loopback mode, enable non-intrusive validation of SFP and cabling quality. This helps isolate marginal components contributing to frame loss. Bottleneckman is congestion-based. Porpoishow offers counters, but no diagnostics. Flow vision is for traffic, not hardware integrity. Ref. Diagnostic tool and Clearlink guide.